Hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. Today, we're going to be going over post assemblies. This is also episode number 26 if you're going through our implementation process. So, jumping right in, a couple things I'm going to go through, focusing on wood framing first, and then we're also going to look at some red iron steel frame examples. But first, there's also some things that you have to know what are post assemblies, and we'll start with that, kind of running down the list here. There's three main things to know about post assemblies. And I'll start with number one. One thing, post assemblies only affect post frame buildings. So just like the name implies, post frame. If you're using stud frame, this does not affect your framing at all. So number two would be, there's three parts shown in the model. There's a lot more parts to post assemblies. So when you get in there and you start setting them up, there are up to 6 or 7 or maybe even 8 parts that you can set. So we got upper post, all these. So again, only three of those are shown in the model. In this example model that I designed here, I'll point a few of those out. So we have a lower post here looking something like a permacolumn product. We have our standard, our primary product, which is the center section of the post. And then you can also have an upper post like I've done here in the gables. I've added a framed on section, maybe a field framed piece that gets added to the post if you're doing something like this. So again, those are the only three that are shown in the model. So if you're looking to see the boats and things like that, we're not showing some of the hardware items. Not important at this time, but it would be on the material list. So again, that's number two. And number three is just you really have to understand that if you're going to use post assemblies, you have to make a decision. And again, you're not forced to use them. If you understand, well, what are the biggest benefits of post assemblies? Looking at foundation, and one challenge that's came up over the years is, there's a lot of settings in the foundation area, and it lets you do a lot of different things, a lot of different configurations from post toe to stem wall, thick edge slab, along with all those different combinations you may have. Well, the challenge has been when you get into setting up things like span tables, which we're going to talk about at the end, is we're trying to automate the material that we're selecting. So if you're a salesperson and you choose the post material in here, that works well. But what happens, when the post material changes, you may need to be also changing the footing size. So we're trying to automate all that. Another case was with the permacolumn. Before we didn't show it in the model, but when you would change the post size, the permacolumn size also has to change. Maybe the footing below ground, the base needs to change, the footing pad, whatever you're using. Again, we're just tying all that together, making it all work. And then, like I said, we'll explain how to incorporate that into span tables at the end. But my number three highlight is just you have to understand that if you're going to do post assemblies, you have to kind of make a decision and use them. I would say for most of the time or all the time, anytime you're using posts, they're going to be assemblies. Because as soon as you activate a post assembly and you start using it, it ignores what your foundation settings here say. So besides the post toe type, or I guess all of them, it ignores what these settings are doing as long as a post assembly is being selected as the post material. So, what would that cause? I'm trying to think, the different instances where that's going to affect and cause issues in your process, and that may be on your quote page. If you're doing a quote page that lists out the foundation and you're using our tokens, again, that's another whole lesson to get into. But when you're using our tokens, you may be using our fastener and base and uplift and listing these items out on your quote page to detail out, what kind of wall framing they're getting. Well, as soon as you use post assemblies, now that can all be described within the name of the column. So it's all working together. It's all in the name. So you kind of need to abbreviate a bit just so that you can see the full description. But now this replaces all of those settings all at once, and then it all works together. So again, we're going to jump right in. First, I'm going to focus on setting up a permacolumn type material where we have a concrete bottom and a standard wood frame post. And I set some of these up beforehand just so we have an example to look at and get started. But we're going to be going through from start. I'll start with a blank slate and we'll set them up and go through. So let's start with the permacolumn. Again, I'm going to use a laminated column as the upper section. This could be a solid, so it could be whatever. But here's the first example that we're going to look at. And you can see I have several items set up. So again, going start to finish, we're going to go through each step and set that up. So I'm starting with our template database just so that it's all generic materials. If you're starting in your setup today, this is what your database would look like. But first thing that you have to know, again, if you were quoting with permacolumns before, we have maybe instructed you to set up your permacolumn products in our foundation tab. So again, you have to move the foundation items to framing that you want to be showing in the 3D model. So I'll show you how to do that. It's not too hard, but I'll walk you through that. So if your items are in here, you would have to select them and delete them out of the foundation section and go into framing. And in this case, I don't have them added yet, but I'm going to just click the plus sign. You could also do this in Excel Upload if you've used Excel. But let's just add a 3-ply permacolumn. We'll set the part length to 5 feet, set the price and cost and weight if you want to set those, and we'll save. So in this case, we've added this framing item, and now that makes it available to be set up in our post assemblies. So I'm going to go ahead and save. So starting with post assemblies, again, when you get into this section, it's in the setup wizard, go to post assemblies, and I'm going to click the plus sign here and just set a name. And again, we're going to start with a 3-ply 2x6 permacolumn. And let's also add the description of the other items that we're going to be including in that assembly. In this case, I'll do a footing pad and an uplift, just standard bracket. So we've got a primary material. I will select my standard post, so 3-ply nail land post. It's going to be going in a post hole foundation type, and we need to set the foundation width and depth. Again, this is going to override the foundation settings in the job. So if I set my foundation width to 16 inch, and we can do the depth, maybe it will be a 4-foot hole. And this is optional. It's whatever you do in your area. And you may have different depths too. So if you want to have different depths, you would need to include the description of the depth. Maybe according to code, you do different depths for your post holes. So again, this is pretty straightforward. We've got our usages. They came over from our primary material, so it's already set. You may want to double check those and set those accordingly. And then now down to the bottom, there's the entries section. So when I click add new, it asks me, well, what do I want to start with? And you could start at the top, you could start at the bottom. I'm going to just start with, since we don't have a top of post, or I'm not going to be setting that up, or upper post. We'll talk about that a little bit later in upper domain. I'm going to drop one down. We're going to all the way to lower post. We're going to start there. So with the lower post, what category do we want that to go to? I'm going to set this to go into framing. So it's going into my framing category. And again, you may have different categories that you have set up. But we'll go with framing, and I'm going to select my material. Since I've added it to framing, I should have my perma column. There it is. And what is the length of it? So we're going to set that to 5 feet. And how many? In this case, just 1 per. So we do that. You could also set up special conditions. Maybe it's related to job questions. Maybe you're doing a project type, commercial, and you do a certain thing or whatever. Again, you could even set up special conditions here. We're not going to for this example. I'm going to save this entry. So now we have our lower post. That's the first part, and that's what we're seeing in this 3D model. We're seeing this lower post here. It's 5 feet. If you tilt it up, you can see the 5-foot section. So notice there's a little gap at the bottom of our blue cylinder. That's the next thing we're going to set up. It's not shown in the model here. It does show up on the cross sections, but it is important to set that up in the right way, and I'll explain how to do that here. So we add new, and I'm going to select post base. When you select post base, it actually lets you, as soon as you select the material, again, your footing pads, whatever you're using, it may be in foundation, maybe, I don't know which category you have it in. I'm going to use this 16-inch composite footing pad, and it asks me what the length is. So that's just saying the height or the thickness of that pad. Let's say it's 3 inches, 4 inches. I'm just going to set it to 4. And then how many? Again, 1 per. So we do this, we click save. I'm not going to do any special conditions. Click save. So now we have our footing pad, and we've got our perma column. Maybe you're doing some kind of uplift bracket or whatever that may be, a custom situation. Again, you can add as many of these as you want. When you click add new and you select, what is the type, select uplift. Maybe you have some uplift bolts that you put through your post. Again, it may be in foundation, maybe in hardware, wherever. You find the item, select it. Just see if I have an uplift bracket in here. Yeah, so here's a boat kit for an uplift anchor. I've got a couple of different ones, and I'll just use that one. So again, 1 per part, and save. And again, you can add as many as you need if you have separate part numbers that you need to include, you can do that. In this case, we've got 3 entries. You can have more than that if you need. So if I click save, we've got our first post assembly created. And I'm going to move right on in and let's look at, so we've done the first one and we're going to test this out in the job, but let's look at our back wall here. So we're doing something a little bit different. In order to do this, I went into Advanced Edit and I selected this back wall and I adjusted the wall steel up. And then I also selected the post assembly, which set all the foundation settings automatically. So that's how I got to that point. But we're going to go ahead and set up that example. And the reason I want to do this example is, again, it's a lot different. It is a stem wall type situation, but it also includes an upper post. So while we don't see anything happening on the bottom other than concrete, we do get another section of wood that shows up in our job review in here. So when we go into framing, we can have our upper post listed in there. So again, let's jump in and set that up. In the setup wizard, again, same place, click the plus sign and select our primary material. In this case, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do another 3-ply lamppost. And it's not post-toe, we're going to do stem wall. And again, foundation width, foundation height. So this can be a little bit confusing. If you think of a foundation width and height, what does that mean? Along with the depth. So the width, we're just going to stick with 8 inches as in the thickness of the wall. And the foundation height is the total height of that wall. So if we say that it's 6 foot tall or 4 foot tall, that means the total wall is 4 feet. So how far does it go in the ground? If it goes in the ground 2 feet, that means it comes back up out of the ground 2 feet. Or if it goes in the ground 4 feet, it would come back out of the ground 2 feet. So this is be right at grade. If this is only in the ground 2 feet, it would be out of the ground 2 feet. So you get the idea. This foundation depth is how far you're going into the grade. And then this is the total height of it. Footing width and depth. So I'm going to set this to 2 foot wide and 1 foot deep. So we have a spread footing at the bottom. And we'll look at a cross section when we get done of this so that you can see the difference and to see what that all looks like. So we'll go ahead and save this. And you can see it gets added here. Now, anytime you save, you can kind of come back and you can edit so you don't have to finish it out. You can always reopen it and continue on. So with that, let's add a description. So we just call that on stem wall with upper post. Again, you could be as descriptive as you want. It's up to you and your setup. So we go to add new. In this case, I'm not going to select top of post. That could be a hardware item, something that you're fastening to your truss. Again, we're not going to use it. It's not shown in the model. You could use it. I'm going to jump to upper post and select framing. That's where I want this piece to go. And in this case, think of, some companies would field frame a section. Maybe the posts are all same long or close to the same length, and then they field frame all that. So in this case, you could do that now. If we go to upper post, we select the framing part. Again, you would need a framing part that you're going to use. If you're using 3-ply of 2x6, you would have to add a 3-ply of 2x6 in here as a part number to do that. So I don't have to set any usages, but I do want to add a few different part lengths so that I have different lengths to go on a gable wall. So going back into post assemblies, now I can continue on and I can add that upper section. If we go to upper post, we select our material and we should see field frame post extension and again the length. So this length here is just asking what is the length from the top of the post today, like how far are we coming down. So when you look at this, in this case I just went 6 inches down. You could set it just to a very small amount, but again the farther the length that you put in there, the farther down this eave wall it's going to come. So if you're just splicing there, you may only put an inch or two in there just so you make sure you get enough. I set mine at 6 inches. So in this case, I could set this length at 6 inches. How many? Again, 1 per. Maybe you want to do 3. If you do 2x6s, if you'd select a 2x6, you could do 3 per part, and it would do the same thing. So if you don't want to create a new item, we could do I could select a 2x6 item here, and I could set this to be 3, and it would do the same thing. It would add 3 of those 2x6s to extend out. So that's a very nice feature if you keep your post all the same length. Again, this one we'll save all. We'll go back to the next step. So we have upper post. Moving on, we want to add a bracket kit for the bottom section. So in this case, you may be using a sturdy wall bracket on the bottom, and we have our upper post at the top. So in this case, it may be a post base. It could just be a hardware item. It's not going to be shown in the model. As you can see, it does get added to the material list. So we have an upper section. We're using 2x6s. We have our sturdy wall bracket. And again, this is, if you think back to the way SmartBuild works now, before this 1.98 release, you would have had to go change the bracket or have a complicated package that's bringing in the correct bracket. Now, when you select this assembly, it's going to bring in the right bracket, maybe even a boat kit, whatever else you want to add here. So again, that sums up that one. And let's move on. Let's look at one other example that I have in this job. And maybe it's not really a permacolumn. Maybe you're just doing a post sleeve, something like that. In this case, I'm using a cedar post for my porch post here. If you think maybe you're doing like a grade guard, the grade guards, one thing I want to point out, like if we wanted to set up a grade guard, again, I could select my item, select my primary material. And again, maybe you want to do foundation items. We could skip over that, but let's say that we want to add a grade guard product or a post sleeve around that post. So when you do that, since the post has to be full length, we don't show it in the model. The post would need to go all the way down to the bottom of the footing. So the only way that we show it in the model is if you actually replace it with a different item, like we do with the permacolumn. So again, not too big of a deal, not going to be shown in the model, but it could be easily set up. In this case, to set it up, I could simply go to my bottom section. Maybe it's just considered an uplift. You could call it an uplift and find that item. Maybe you have it in foundation. I'm just going to pick this one, apply, and one per part. And again, maybe you want to find one that fits the size, but you get the idea. So we have the grade guard, we have the part, and we click save. In this case, it would not show this item. It's an uplift. It's not shown in the model, and the post length is not being affected, but you can have the correct size grade guard coming in with your product. So if you go back to the current way SmartBuild was working, you would have had to select a different grade guard and automate all that in all these settings. Now, if you use post assemblies, it's going to automate those sizes for you. So we've went through 3 different examples of post assemblies, setting up wood framing, looking at your stem wall, your permacolumn, maybe doing sleeves, things like that. What I want to cover next is for our steel frame customers. We want to look at, well, how can this benefit other companies, maybe not using wood frame. So if we look at a project like this where we're using an I-beam type frame, the thing with it is maybe you're not adding all these different things to it, but you do need to automatically size the foundation, the footing, and that's how this can be nice, along with other brackets that may come with it. In this case, when I go to my details and my wall framing and I select my beam size, or again, as we're going to talk about span tables at the end, maybe we're going to automate the post size with a span table. In this case, I'm just selecting it manually from the job, but as soon as I select my post size, it automatically sets my concrete foundation, footing, sets all these automatically and ignores my settings that I have here. So back to my point of you really need to choose one or the other because it can be very confusing. What settings are taking effect. You would just start to ignore these foundation settings anytime that you're using post material because that's how the system works. So when I set my post material here, I have an 8-inch thick wall, 24 inches tall, and it also sets my stem wall. And if you run a cross section on it, you can kind of see what it's doing here. Another note that when you're looking at your cross sections, it actually shows you the details of what's in that post assembly. So the post assembly, it's showing I have a post base, I'm using an anchor kit, and then it shows me the footing width and depth. So it's not showing me the other foundation notes anymore. So if I would go into this job, no matter what I set my foundation notes to, these here are ignored and they're coming in from this assembly. So if I go back, we'll go into the setup wizard and we'll see how this is set up. So for an all metal example that I have here, the one that I set up, we'll take a look at it really quickly. We just set our name. What do you want it to be? Describe the wall size. Maybe you add some more detail here. You select your primary material. Again, select my foundation type, footing width, height, depth, and all this. And then where it's used. And then down at the bottom, the only thing I'm adding is my anchor kit for the column. And just add new. I have it set to post base. And then my result in a job looks something like this. If I go back to the model, you can see it would look like this. So again, that's a really quick example of the red iron. But the last part that I want to cover before we close the video is span tables and how that works. So if you think of your wall framing today, you're selecting a post material, and maybe yours is being driven by the span tables, or maybe you've even taken a step further and you're driving it by your zip code, which we have a new feature to do that, loading tables, which would control your loading here. So your zip code drives the loading span tables. So in order to set that up, I'm going to jump over into span tables. In here, I'm going to start with a sample span table that I've got set up. And when I look at my span table here, I'm just using a nail lamb column, 12-foot wall height up to 8-foot post spacing. My building depth is 80. I use this column. And again, yours may be totally different, but the idea is span tables select the column size as the building size changes. Now, if you think, well, I also need to change the footing, change whatever's coming with it, the post base, all that, maybe you're using perma columns. Again, this is where now your span tables can also, instead of just controlling the post material, you can have them control these foundation settings automatically. So if you think of what's happening in this area here, and now imagine that when I set this up, if I set up post assemblies, it would control the foundation settings also. Again, another reason why you have to make a decision, are you going to use post assemblies or not? It's not a setting or a feature that you have to use, but if you do use it, your system's going to be a lot more powerful and automated, but it's not something that you have to use. And going forward, after this release, we may do some tweaking, some updates to this process as we get further into it. But just for demonstration purposes here, we want to start from scratch and add a new table. I'm going to set up a post type. It's just Eve post, it's not gable. And let's call this just standard loading. And again, there's a whole video series around span tables, so you might want to watch the span table videos to get further into it. But in this example, when I set my post height or my wall height, I select the wall height, and we're going to start with 8 foot. We set the post spacing maybe 8 foot, building depth up to 40 feet wide. That's 40-foot truss, and we choose our material. Now, if you're using assemblies, we start with this perma column. You can see that it loads in the key, the assembly key, which doesn't really mean anything to you, but it does mean something to SmartBuild. And then we have the material. Now, when you think through this, the one thing to keep in mind is, without any changes to the way it works now, you would almost have to have a loading that you select that uses all perma columns. So it has to be its own unique loading. In this case, if you're getting into span tables, for the most part, I think it will, your biggest part of your automation benefits are going to come from just using standard posts along with the footing size and all that. So when you start getting into loading, you're going to have to have different loadings for perma columns and a different loading for not perma columns, which could be a lot of work and setup. So in this case, I would just recommend to stick with your standard assemblies, which may be just your standard posts. But the biggest benefit is going to be automating the footing products that come with it, as in the brackets or the uplift items. So again, that's a little bit into span tables and how they can automate that. So I hope this helps everyone understand what post assemblies are and maybe help you make the decision, is it something that you want to start using? Again, let us know if you have any questions. Thanks for watching and have a great day.